Hi everyone, it's James here, and this is the third instalment of our Edabit challenges. So we're moving up to a medium level of difficulty now, so we're kicking it up a notch. These challenges are a bit more challenging, but they're not something that shouldn't be unachievable for most junior developers. So let's look at some medium challenges on Edabit. Okay, so here we are again on the Edabit website, and I'm just going to go straight to the difficulty level, and we've already done very easy and easy in the previous tutorial, so we're going to go to the medium section now. And as I mentioned in the previous tutorial, these are a bit of a jump from the very easy tutorials that we did at the start of this series. So if you don't really get what the questions are asking or how to solve them, then don't worry, because there is a bit of a jump at this stage. But we're going to go through a few of these today. And we're going to start with the first one, which is this matches property challenge. And you can read through this challenge on the instructions page here, but basically what it's asking you to do is, if you're not familiar with the Lodash library, it's a library that provides a lot of helper functions, and one of the functions inside there, I've not heard of it before, but it's called matches property. And basically what you use it for is to look inside an object to see if a particular property's value matches a value that you pass it in as a second argument. Now this challenge is a little bit different from some of the other ones that we've looked at, because you actually need to return a function from the function that you're creating. And the reason for that is it can then be used as a callback function, so you could pass it into find, for example, and it'll make your find statements a little bit easier to use and to read. So if you're looking for a particular property in an object, then you can use this matches property function that we're going to be creating. So let's go ahead and look at the code. So the function's already been created for us, and we've been passed in a key and a value. But one thing that's not clear from the instructions is whether or not we're looking for nested properties. So if there's a nested object that's got properties that are more than one level deep. But if we have a look in the tests, you can see this is the code that will run when we click this check button here. First of all, they've put a little check in to just make sure that you're not using Lodash and just not importing the library and doing it that way. They want you to write it yourself. But you can see the data source that's going to be used is this array of objects. And there are no nested properties in there. We've just got make, year, and color for each of the cars that are in there. So we don't need to look for any nested properties. So we can write our code with that in mind. So the instructions say we need to return a function, so we can do that straight away. We can say return function is what we're going to return from the function that we're creating. And depending on where this matches property function is actually called, inside of the function that gets returned, we'll actually receive an object from the callback of where it's used. So if we used it in this case here, where we've got the find function that we're calling on the array, with a little bit of JavaScript magic, this function that gets called will actually receive each of the items in the array in turn. So we could probably call that item rather than object, because we're assuming it's an object at this point. And with that item that we're looking at, each item in the array, we can check its key property. So the key is passed in as part of the overall function. And we can just say, well, is that equal to the value that we're looking for? So it's kind of like doing a little search for us. But this function is going to get called for each item in the array. But if we do find this item has a key which is equal to the value that's been passed in, then we can just return true, because then we find a match for what we're looking for. But if not, we're going to return false. So that's all we need to make these tests pass. If this was a nested object, then obviously we'd have some problems with this code. But just to satisfy this particular challenge, that should be all that we need. So there's some refactoring that we can do with this. So take a look at the code and see what you think. But hopefully one of the most immediate things that you can see is that this if statement's a little bit redundant. So we could actually just remove this return true and return false lines. Basically, we could just say we're just going to return if the item with the property of key is equal to the value, and that should still work just as well. But we can do some further refactoring to bring this up to sort of ES6 standards and turn it into array functions. So let's just get rid of this function definition, and we can do the same thing here as well. But we could leave it like this, but because we're returning these values and we don't have any additional code within our functions, we can use implicit returns and remove the curly braces and also remove the return keywords as well. And this isn't actually an arrow function here, but let's just add those in. So we could remove this, we could remove this, And also we could remove this return statement and these curly braces here. And one final thing, we can also remove the parentheses around the item argument because there's only one argument. We don't actually need those parentheses. And this is basically the equivalent code that we had just a moment ago, but a bit more streamlined. And I think it makes sense to remove the if statement because whenever you're doing a check and then returning either true or false, depending on the result of that check, then chances are the if statement's not needed. So if we click submit final now, hopefully the test should still pass. And now you can see the tests have passed and we've completed this exercise. Let's just set the difficulty to medium. And let's go back to our challenges again so that we can move on to the next one. So let's move on to the next challenge, and we're going to look at this one, this likes versus dislikes. And so I'll explain this one a little bit. Again, you can read the instructions if you're completing this challenge yourself. But essentially it's talking about a situation such as you might have on YouTube where you've got a like and dislike button. So you can't basically press the like button twice. It's either on or off that you've liked a particular video. And likewise, you can dislike a video, but you can't like and dislike a video at the same time. So we're presented with a function, and in that function, we're going to be passed an array. And inside the array is going to be a list of likes or dislikes, so the actual string like or dislike. And we need to work out what the state of the video is by working out which is the last button that was pressed. However, if the array has two corresponding likes or dislikes next to each other, then we should respond with nothing because the user's obviously unselected their choice of the video. Okay, so let's go over to the code and have a look at this. So let's first of all set up an initial state, which is going to be something that we'll be returning from the function. So we'll set up a variable called result. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to loop through the array one item at a time. So let's initialize a for loop with the I variable as the iterator. And we're going to keep going until I is equal to or greater than the length. So let's increment I on each iteration. Okay, so we need to check each item in turn and see what value it is and then update our result correspondingly. So we could say if the item that we're currently looking at is equal to like, then we'll set our result to like. And let's do another check as well. We'll say if the item that we're looking at is dislike, then the result is going to be a dislike. And then from our function, let's not forget to return the actual result itself. So this isn't going to work, but let's just check our results and see what's happening at the moment. Okay, so we're getting some positive tests here, some tests that are passing. So we've got this first test, which is just being passed in a dislike, should give us a like. But for example, these ones, we're not taking into consideration whether the user's unclicked an existing like button. So we can update our if statements to take account for that. So what we could do is nest another if inside here and say, if the result that's currently stored, or if the value that's currently stored in the result variable is equal to like, and we're dealing with another like in this position of the array, then what we should do is actually say the result is nothing, because it's like the user's actually just clicked the like button again, and then they've just removed the value that we had stored in the result. But of course, if that's not the case, then what we should do is we should make sure that we set the value of result to like, because this is the first time they've actually clicked the like button. So we can just actually recreate that as well in this section too for dislikes. So if the result that we've got currently stored is set to a string of dislike, then what we want to say is the result is nothing, because again, it's like the user's actually clicked the dislike button twice, so it's taken the status of that off. But if they haven't, what we'll do is we'll make sure that the result is dislike. So basically this for loop is going to go through the entire array. It might only be a short one, but it could be a long one. And essentially it's going to check each value and it's going to keep updating this value of result, setting it either to like, nothing, or dislike, depending on the sequence of buttons that have actually been pressed. So let's check this again. And there you can see we've got all of our tests passing. So this is one potential solution for it, but it's a little bit clunky. You can see we've got these nested if statements in here, which isn't very nice. And also we've basically got the same repeating code, but we're just checking for likes or dislikes. So there's probably going to be a much better way that we can solve this. So just to point out what we're doing here, we're taking an array and then we're just returning a value based on the contents of that array. We're not picking an item out of the array, we're actually generating a new value, but we're basically deriving a value from the values that are inside the array. So if you've done any work with array methods, have a think now and see if you can think of an array method that would fit this kind of pattern. And one way to loop through an array and return a single value is to use the reduce function. So I'm just going to trash all of this code that we've got here now because it doesn't really fit in too well with the pattern that we're going to be using now. And I'll just straight away convert this to an arrow function as well. And just remove those parentheses there. Okay, so straight away I'm going to go for the implicit return because we're just going to be using one line of code here. So on the array, I'm going to call the reduce function. So the reduce function takes a callback which has several different parameters. The first being the accumulator, which I'm just going to call ACC, and also the item, which is going to correspond to each item in the array. So this is just another array function here, and you can see we're going to return a value here. And you can initialize a reduce function with an initial value the same way that we did before by setting a result equal to nothing at the start of our function. So this is in effect a similar setup to what we just had with our previous function version. So how are we going to condense all of those if statements into something more readable? Well, if you remember those if statements, all we were doing is really checking if the value that was already stored in result was equal to the item that's actually currently being looked at. And if it was, we'd set it to nothing, but if not, we'd actually set it to the item value itself. So what we could do here is say is the accumulator, which is essentially the same as the result variable in the previous version of the function, is that equal to the item that we're currently looking at? Well, if it is, then the user's obviously unclicked either the like or dislike button, so we could actually then just return nothing from here. But if it doesn't match, then we just want to return the item, which will either be the string of like or dislike. So what we need to do to get this to work is just to return that value each time, which will be then set into the accumulator for the next iteration. But because we're not doing any more work here, let's just convert that to another implicit return as well. Whoops, that's going to fail. Let's just make sure this is all formatted correctly. I'm just going to break this onto a new line here so that it's a bit easier to read. And that's our initialization there still. And let's put our parentheses matching here as well. So there you go, you have all of those if statements condensed into a single ternary operator. And we've got our initialization here as well, so we don't need to have a separate result variable. And if we click the submit button again, hopefully that should pass all the tests again for us. There you go, you can see all the tests have passed and we've now completed that challenge. So let's go and have a look at one more challenge for this tutorial. So let's actually go and have a look at this string slice-athon. So for this challenge, there's actually 5 exercises that you need to complete, or 5 functions that need to be completed. And for each function, you're going to be passed in a string, such as this for the examples here. And for each function, you've just got to return different parts of the string based on these comments here. So we'll work through these step by step. The first challenge is to return the first 5 characters of the string. So we should be getting A, B, C, D, E. And if we go over to the code, most of the function work has been done already for us because you're supposed to be using the slice function to achieve these solutions. So there probably are different ways that you can solve some of these challenges, but let's stick with the slice function as it's the most straightforward. Okay, so to slice a string, we get a portion of the string back. We basically put in a start position and an end position. So if we start at 0, because the string, much like an array, will be 0 indexed, and then we want to get the first 5 strings, so we just put 5. I can't remember if it's the end position or the length that you specify here, but in either case that will work for this example. So let's just check that. So you can see a couple of those tests that are using challenge 1 are indeed passing, so that's all good. We could of course convert that into an arrow function as well, just to make it a bit neater. And remove the parentheses there. Oops, there we go. And there's a brace there. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so still all good. And that's the first challenge done. Let's have a look at the next one, which is to get to the last 5 characters of the string. So this is a slightly different approach that we need to take here. I'm just going to basically put the starting position 5 characters back from the end of the string. So how do we get to the end of a string? Well, we say the string that's been passed in, we access its length property, and then just go back or subtract 5 characters to take us back to the position and give us the last 5 characters of the string. So let's go ahead straight away and convert this guy into an arrow function, and parentheses gone. And let's run our checks again. Hopefully some more tests should now be passing. Okay, so yeah, you can see the second test up here is passing, and there's a further one down here with some digits, which is doing the same thing. So that's all we need to do for challenge 2. Let's have a look at challenge 3. This gets a little bit trickier, and basically we're saying all characters in the string from the back. So what they've done is basically reverse the string and then returned all of the characters. So as far as I know, there's no way you can do this in JavaScript with just the slice function. So let's see what they're saying the resources here. Okay, yeah, so they're suggesting looking at these array methods here. So without diving into that, I'll show you what the solution to this is. So we've got the string, we want to basically reverse it. So this is just a simple, how do you reverse a string in JavaScript? So we take the string, we split it into an array. So each of the letters in the string will now be into an array. I can show you a bit what that looks like now, just in the developer tools. Let's just clear this. So let's say you've got A, B, C, D, E. If we split that by the no space character, let's have a look at that. You can see we now get an array, and all we then need to do to reverse this is just call the array reverse function that's available to us. So you can see everything's in the reverse order, but of course we don't want to return an array, we want to return the actual string as well. So we just basically join it back together with an empty space again, and then we've got the reverse string. So that's a pretty standard kind of question, how to reverse a string in JavaScript. So let's fill that out here. Reverse and then join again. Let's just change this to an arrow function. Oops, and remove the return keyword. And hopefully now we should be getting some more tests passing for that challenge. Okay, yeah, so we've got the third one and the one with the digits down here. So it's just a simple reversing of the string. And okay, so that's that challenge done. Let's have a look at challenge 4. And this is basically to get the first 6 characters in the string, but start with the 6th character. Okay, so it's almost like getting these characters here at the end of the string. So I guess you could actually reverse the string and then just take the first 6 characters, or you could get the first 6 characters of the string and then reverse them. So I don't think it matters too much which way you do it. Let's get our challenge 4 up here. So we're going to slice it and get the first 6 characters, and then we'll just do the same thing again. We're going to split it and reverse it and then join it back together, and that should be sufficient to swap the first 6 characters of a string around. Let's see if that works. Okay, yeah, that works fine. And we could probably, I'm not sure if this is what they were trying to do with the actual challenge, but you could actually just call the challenge 3 function that we've got here to do the reversing work for us, and then just pass in the sliced string, the first 6 characters of the string, and that should work again. It just makes it a little bit neater, and obviously it reuses some code that we've already got as well, which is always good. The test seems to still pass, so we'll stick with that for our solution. And then this final challenge is asking us here to take the last 7 characters and only return the odd positioned ones. Okay, so we've got this, this will be the last 7 characters, I guess, here. And then basically we're supposed to go T is a character that's returned, and then we miss out the U, and then return the V, and then the W is missed out, etc. Okay, so we need to loop through those characters and only return them if they're in an odd position. Okay, so let's do our slicing first. So to get the last 7 characters, we access the string's length and take 7 away from it. That'll give us the last 7 characters. And then we could actually loop through this using a for loop, but I'm not going to show you that example. I'm going to use a bit of a higher level JavaScript technique, and we'll use another array method. But before we do that, we actually need to convert the string into an array. So let's call the split function. So we've now got an array of those characters. And then I'm going to call the filter function, which basically removes any items from the array that don't match a particular condition. So we want to remove anything that's not in an odd position. So we can access the actual item itself. Let's call that item rather than number. And the index of where that position is. So this will start at 0. And then I'm going to use a modulus operator here. So let's first of all add 1 to the index so that we're starting at 1 rather than 0. And I'm going to say if that index, modulus 2, which is basically any value left after dividing the index plus 1 divided by 2, if that's equal to 1, so if there's 1 left over, this will give us an odd number. So this expression will return true and the item will be kept inside of the array. But if not, if this is false, then the character will be dropped. So this will have the effect of keeping any odd numbered item and then dropping any even numbered item. And then just right on the end here, we'll just make sure that we're joining the array back together to give us a string. So let me just put this on separate lines so you can see what's going on. Okay, so we're just chaining some functions together with slicing it, splitting it into an array, filtering out any even numbered items, leaving the ones in the odd position, and then joining it back together as a string, and that's in the wrong place. Okay, so if we click check again, that should be enough to get all the tests passing. Hey, okay, so now we've got all of our tests passing, and you can see that last one in the example is giving us the same value that they're expecting for challenge 5. So one last thing, let's just put this into an arrow function. You don't need to do this for the challenges, but you probably find you'll start writing more arrow functions when you're familiar with them. And we could do something like that. Okay, and that just neatens things up a bit. So let's submit that as the final result. So that's pretty much the end of this tutorial. Hopefully you've learned some a few things about completing more advanced exercises. There's nothing massively too tricky in here, but you can see that there's a big jump from what we were doing in the very easy section to medium. And especially if you want to write neat and efficient code, you're probably going to start having to use things like array functions and thinking a little bit outside the box, rather than having like messy if statements, for example, as we did in some of these earlier exercises. Okay, so I might do a few more of these tutorials based on some of the harder levels of challenges that are here. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And let me know in the comments below what your favourite exercise was from this tutorial. But that's it for now. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.